Hey, Discord community. I wanted to share this so that I lock it in for my own benefit and memory. I've been noticing lately that when I get caught up in what's happening here on the left-hand side, which was actually the morning session, live trading with Danny, I constantly lose when I'm taking entries in the fashion that I'm taking them there. And I've also noticed lately that as I leave my long and short positions on my trading view, and then I actually like make a copy each day of my session so that it's locked in. Like I can go back to any of these sessions and it'll show where I took a long, where I took a short, whether that was a win or a loss. It's been really beneficial because I've noticed a few patterns lately. Number one, this big pattern that I want to point out in this video is that this short position coming off of a supply zone was an excellent entry, and I ended up getting out at 50 ticks. Why? Well, because I just lost 50 ticks. So I had a very small mental goal of just making back what I had lost. But that's really short-sighted because this has happened a lot lately. This ended up running all the way back down to this zone, this 30-minute demand zone for 150, actually eventually 200 ticks, right? So if I would have just stayed in that and gotten in my full position, like there were opportunities here to size in. I could have gotten in here with maybe 2 micros, gotten in again here after the retest with 2 micros, and then my full size is 5 micros. So I could have been holding through this to my full TP, but got out, and then I thought, oh, maybe this is a retest. It's going to reverse back long. Instantly stopped out here. Oh, it's gonna go long, stopped out again. Oh, now we're going short. It pumps, stops me out. Oh, now it's going long, stops me out. So it was followed by 4 immediate losses that were super quick, just caught up in this downward trending chop. Where instead, if I'm still holding this trade, I'm not doing any of this, right? I'm just sitting there with a smile on my face, and maybe I re-entered here and re-entered here, and I'm just following this short, right? Then here, this was, I think Danny's long, maybe not, but what ended up happening here is I had a win and a loss. So this final trade here, basically this entry's a little weird. I think it was more down here. That would make more sense. And it did go, let's go 50-50. I sold half my position here and then ended up getting stopped out down here later. So anyway, that was kind of like a break even. But here's what I want to point out. When I don't move my stop, I enter off of an actual supply or demand zone, and I then follow it all the way through. This is what happens, right? I have a 250 tick win here with take profits at various levels. So my first entry, was here, re-entered here, re-entered here, re-entered here, and then I was in full position after I noticed that this trend had hit a demand zone and started to stall. And it was starting to show pump signs, pump signs, pump signs, and then a breakout, fakes back down, and then takes off. And I knew right here when it broke, did not totally dump and break through, then it was going to go, right? Like that was basically the liquidity sweep and that was it. Well, I want to point something out here though. On the live call, Danny was calling out shorts here. So this took a lot of mental fortitude for me to instead look at my plan and go long. And part of the reason why I also saw the longs was because over here there was another 30-minute supply, so 30-minute demand zone right underneath this newer 31. So this is the 30 that it bounced through. There was another 30 right here. So my thought was everyone's thinking short, but all it's going to do is hit this next demand zone. It's not going to fill this lower imbalance, which everyone wants. So I was pretty confident going into this. It was also bumping off of the 30 and had been making higher lows respectively. So I was looking pretty good. But here's the best part and the biggest learning lesson for me. If I would have had my stop at break even after I hit my 50 ticks, I would have been stopped out right here. And this has been happening a lot for me lately. I get that first take profit win, but it's only a partial win, and then it pulls back. Boom. I get stopped out and it takes off. It's happened a lot lately where if I would have just kept my first stop and stayed in, it would have gone 200 ticks, meaning I was right. But I moved my stop and that ended up limiting my upside. So this time I said, I'm going to run an experiment. I'm going to leave my stops at 50 ticks the entire trade, no matter what happens. I don't care if it goes 150 ticks and reverses on me and stops me out. I'm holding. And so with that mentality, it ended up running up, hitting my first take profit, coming back down, bouncing at the 50% mark of the demand zone, having a nice breakout here, hitting 100 ticks, and then it hit 150, came back down to 100. Right here, maybe I would have trailed my stop to like here. It's still going up. Now I probably would have trailed my stop to like here, and it would not have hit my next one. It missed it by a tick, maybe two, 3 ticks. Reverse back down, I would have stopped out right here for a modest win. But guess what? It bounced again, boom, hits my fourth take profit level, and then it reverses back down all the way to here, which, I mean, this is the edge of this first imbalance. It might have also, at any of these points, gone back to the demand zone, and I would have been okay with that. It would have been kind of a fun experiment to watch. But it ended up bouncing here and then taking off for my full 250 tick take profit. Well, this one trade more than made up for all my losses in the morning session. I'm now up 143 bucks on, 5 micros, and usually that would mean that I'm up about 75 ticks. So positive 75 ticks on the day after some really erratic execution this morning and not holding this first winning trade. Like if instead my P&L was like this, zone to zone, I have a banger day, right? If I just went like that, full position here off of the liquidity level and the 2 hour, held it, boom. That's 4 out of 5 take profits. And then here I notice that we're in a zone, I cancel out, take full profit, and then start to look long. That's a much cleaner. That's 2 trades, three, my first one being a loss, and then, I shouldn't have taken that anyway because I was in between zones. One of my rules is we need to be going bouncing off of a demand or a supply zone. I don't want to trade in no man's land here. So I shouldn't have taken that first trade. Like, what if I just did 1, 2, right? And yeah, I had to hold them longer, right? These are 20 minutes and maybe like 40 minutes or an hour, but way less caught up in the chop, right? Way less influenced by these huge wicks and these ranges and all these things. Like, I don't need to do any of that. And so I wanted to share this with everyone in the Discord. Number one, to hold myself accountable and to reinforce this idea, because when you teach something, you learn it better yourself. But number two, I just wanted to share this because doing this chop stuff that I've been doing hasn't been working. And so I really wanted to stop the insanity and just try to find a better way that will work for me long term. Um, with that being said, I mean, hopefully this helped someone. I found it to be really insightful to run this experiment and have it come through and just hold, not trail my stop to break even, not trail my stop to like the most recent candle close and just keeping it super tight and closing out here because ultimately it's limiting my upside. And my philosophy of trading has evolved to limit my downside and let my profits run. So this is what that looks like. Now, there's a lot of different scenarios where this may have gone to 50 ticks and reversed for 4 out of 5 being hit with my full stop instead of a break even. There's a scenario where I hit 100 ticks and then it turns around and hits 3 stops, and that's actually my true break even because that would mean I made 75 bucks and I lost 75 bucks, right? So it was a bit mentally taxing to hold it through to 150 ticks until I actually would have had a positive P&L on a full reversal. And maybe this won't work with every single trade setup long term, but in my mind, if I'm trading off of a demand or a supply zone, then this strategy should work because this should be near the bottom at least for the next 100, 150, 200 ticks, like it should, if it's coming out of a strong zone and I'm charting the right zones, it should start to pop and then bounce from here. And I don't have to so closely follow it up if my sizing is appropriate. And that's the last piece is I'm only doing 5 micros maximum with full size. That means in half size, I'm only doing 2 micros, 3 micros, right? So this is really small, relatively small size. And I think that this for me is more closely related to how I would like to trade long term. I know that recently Danny did a video where you could size way up with a prop firm and have really tight stops. Totally different strategy. I'm not saying that's wrong, and I'm not saying that this one is right. That's not the goal of this video. The goal of this video is to show that for me, I've had a big problem with FOMOing into entries with a lot of erratic one-to-one efforts at just doing my first one-to-one and then maybe letting a little runner go instead of being patient, letting it bounce off of zones that I've charted and then entering. And this is popping now. Um, it looks like, ultimately that might be low of day and it's going to keep just popping, but that's fine. I'm fine with catching 250 ticks clean and getting out because, I mean, look at that trade. That's a beautiful trade right there, right? So, long story short, I want to let my profits run. And in order to do that, I need to allow it the time to do that and not enter, exit trades every 2 minutes, right? I entered one trade, re-entered 3 more times for a full size of 5 micros, and then I let it go for an hour with the ups and downs and all the things. That's a very different trading experience. And honestly, if it would have turned around and hit my stop and then dumped for the imbalance fill, I would have been okay with that because I followed my plan. And guess what? I can get an entry on the imbalance still. Like I can wait for it to retest or I can catch it on the breakout, close out, reverse my position, go short. But at the end of the day, this was the play, and look at this thing play out. Yeah, it would be nice in hindsight to say, oh, you should have left a runner. I'm not shooting for 400, 500 ticks at this point in my career. My full W is 250 ticks. So that is a full W trade right there for me. And maybe in the future, I'll extend those out or move them. But right now, I'm just trying to be strict about leaving my take profits where they are and not moving them closer, not moving them farther due to fear or greed. I actually have this set up in my ATM strategy. This would be kind of like the last thing that I show here. I had this set up on my ATM strategy. There we go. Let's close this stuff down. Oh, close that down. Close this down. All right, sorry about that, guys and gals. But this is the last thing I want to show because it is important. My first entry ATM is one-to-one. And then I've recently adopted this and I really like it. I then go to second entry and it goes to 50 and 100. My entry might be a few ticks off, but I don't marry them and consolidate them. I just leave it. And then my third entry, it might be a little above or below. Like it might be a worse position or a better position. That's set to 51, 50, a 1 to 3. I leave it. I don't move either of these. And so, hypothetically, yes, I would take a full 50 tick loss, but I would also take a full 150 tick win. It wouldn't average up my number and then I move it down and my win is actually only 125 ticks because I moved it, right? Like I don't touch it. So it's just always there. And so you can see as I sized in, they're slightly off. They're not exactly 50 ticks apart, all of them. And that's because it's dependent upon where I entered, right? And so I just wanted to point that last piece out because that little detail has really helped me. Um, I am focusing on letting it retest, letting it stall because it's about to reverse. And I'm doing, my first two entries like right away, and then I do my third entry during the next retest. I do my fourth entry during the next retest. I do my fifth entry during the next retest. I don't always get five. Sometimes it takes off after my third, entry, and I'm fine with that. Like I don't need it to be my full position. If it immediately takes off in a profit, whatever. Like I'm not gonna try and chase it and get a horrible entry, 75 ticks in profit. Um, but this one, it stalled enough for me to get full position and then took off, and that's great. So I just want to point that out that like I'm not um, moving those after I enter, and that's been a big key for me recently. Uh, Mindset is the biggest thing lately, the mental game. Like my technical analysis and my technical execution of trading has been solid, but now I'm reading the mental game of trading as suggested by someone in the Discord yesterday, and it's already very solid. It's a book that I would recommend. I'm only a couple chapters in, but it's already a really good book, and it's helping me to realize what's happening during this phase of my trading when I'm quickly and rapidly experiencing loss, win, but I limited my profits, loss, right? Like, what's happening here? And so I'm working on writing out every trade and doing an emotional map right now to try to figure out what's going on here. But this is also worth celebrating. And that's the real reason I wanted to do this video is I wanted to celebrate this big victory and talk about it enough to solidify it in my brain that this is the way that I want to trade. I want to be more methodical and I want to let my profits run. Eventually, maybe this ends up being a 400 tick trade for me because this thing is just taken off and I leave runners or I extend out my fourth and fifth to 100 ticks each instead of 50 ticks each. And like there's different stuff I can do later to scale out in different ways and chase these things farther. But right now, 250 ticks is a solid move, and this is really working for me. So, hope this is helpful to somebody out there, and wishing you all the best in your trading journey. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. Like, this isn't Jeff Trades, this is Danny Trades, and the Traders Evolved community. Like, Danny is still the king here, and I'm using this supply and demand strategy, but I'm also incorporating what I am comfortable with and what I've been seeing more success with, which is having harder take profits and leaving my stop at 50 ticks. That's basically the alteration. Everything else is Danny's strategy. Like here's a 2 hour supply zone, here's the bottom of the four, here's a 30-minute demand zone, right? All these white boxes that are darker are low volume gaps that I've marked. So all of this is still Danny's strategy. The only difference is I didn't have success when I would only do a stop and then trade it like Danny, where I just watch the P&L and like I wait for pops and then I manually close out. I didn't have success with that. I don't I haven't had success yet with it, I should say. But with this strategy, I like how it hits my take profit and instantly sells it at the limit. Um, my problem, though, after reflection was when it would hit my first take profit and then all these other positions move to break even, 9 times out of 10, it would come back and break me even and then take off. So 50 ticks just wasn't enough for it to give it room to breathe. So I would be right on a big move and I would only take 50 ticks on 1 out of 5 positions. Where when I'm wrong, I'm losing 5 out of 5 positions. That's not good math, right? Better math is look, if you're going to let this thing run, let it run, right? And there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but this one in particular has worked for me. more than just this one trade. Like I've done this as well in the past where my auto trail went to here and I moved it back down. And now I don't even have auto trail on. Like I just my ATM sets it at 50 ticks and I leave it for the stop loss. And for me, hopefully this will continue to play out. But here's the key. It only works if I'm working the supply and demand strategy. So this is the last thing I'll say. This doesn't work in between zones. If I did this here, I get smoked with a full stop loss, full stop loss, full stop loss, because it's not trending here. This is ranging up and down and bouncing. Like maybe if I did it here, it would be good. And then guess what? It comes back down. My stop loss is somewhere around these lows. I'm still okay because it pops back up. And it comes back down here. Ooh, I'm getting scared, but it pops again. Because guess what? We have the reinforcement of the demand zone. It would have to break through this demand zone in order to stop me out, essentially. And I like that. I like having that defense. And it's kind of the same thing here. Like this is now showing rejection. This is a 4 hour and a 2 hour zone. So even though it wicked above, this is showing a nice rejection off here. So, if this comes back down, maybe a good trade would be to catch it back down. Um, and you have the reinforcement and the backstop of this low volume gap in this supply zone. But guess what? If I just go in there and I start to go for like little wins, 50 ticks here, 50 ticks there, like, ooh, I think it's gonna pump back up and I'm gonna go back for a high of day and all this stuff. I just find that it's not successful for me. Like I would rather here now, like wait for a break and a retest, get in, and hope that this point right here is the high and this trend is over. And it's backed by this supply zone, which to me is not broken. Um, there's been a little bit of ambiguity about this, but to me, the same time frame that was used to draw the supply zone is the one that is required for it to close above or below in order to break it. So even though this wicked above, this is the 2 hour, and we have not closed above it. So to me, this is still a valid supply zone. It wicked above, sellers stepped in, and I would be willing to bet that this then rejects back down, and this would be a nice move back down to this 30. But this was a really strong run. It did wick above, and maybe it will come up to this liquidity level, pull back, and then keep running to fill this imbalance. Maybe it will. So I'm done trading for the day. I'm not going to try to make this play, but the point with that is this has worked for me much better than this, and I want to reinforce this in my mind so that I can do this more often and also take fewer trades. This is one trade with three additional re-entries over a 1 hour period, and then I just watched the P&L run up. I didn't have to analyze every freaking 1 minute or zoom down to a 15 second and do all this crazy stuff where my mind is on hyper processing power. Like it's pretty simple when you zoom out and look at it and see this work out. It bounced off a 30 minute. I entered. It retested multiple times, took off. I should have a lot of confidence now that there's nothing in its way until it gets way up here, right? And that ended up being true. So hopefully this was helpful. Appreciate you all for the feedback and for probably the feedback, good or bad, that I'll get on this video. So cheers. Take care.